Good morning. Oh, we can do better than that. It's Easter and it's beautiful outside. Good morning. That's what I'm talking about. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Society of Bangor. I am Reverend Drew Moeller. It is a pleasure to have you join us either here in person or on the internet. Before we get started, I just want to wish everybody a happy Easter and also to introduce and thank ahead of time our two guest musicians, Annalise Smith, who you heard during our in-gathering music, and you will hear more from her. And we also have Aaron Mahoney, who is sitting with his back to us, I believe, for a good reason, because he's going to be playing organ today. So we're going to get a chance to see. There we go. Going to take a wave there, Aaron. There we go. Great. So before we get started, we have a couple of announcements. So I'm going to ask John Armand to come forward and offer those announcements.
Good morning and happy Easter. Yeah, good to be here with you today. After the story for all ages, our youth will be going downstairs to the vestry for their youth chapel. At 11:30 today, the Social Justice Committee will be meeting via Zoom. Now, our 2023 stewardship campaign is going strong. So far, we've received pledges from 82 people for a total of $121,261. We are just a bit shy of our goal of $126,808, so a little over $5,000 to go. Thank you, people. Please remember to mark your calendars for Saturday, May 7th, the live auction at 7 p.m. Now, next Sunday, April 24th, immediately after the service, Council will be holding our annual budget meeting. This is the time to ask questions and share your input on next year's proposed budget, for which I think you found some information on the tables on the way in the Dorothy. Please plan on staying a little while after the service for this important opportunity to share your perspectives on next year's budget. So thank you for your support, whether dropped in the basket near the entrance or online using the handy Donate Now button on our website. This month, half of the undesignated donations we collect will be donated in turn to Partners for Peace, who provide support to survivors and work to end domestic violence in Penobscot and Piscataquis counties. And finally, we want to offer our gratitude to those who contributed to the Easter Memorial Flower Fund. This year, the flowers were given in memory of the Liszewskis and Sorosinskis by Catherine Foxon, in memory of Maria, Becky, and Charlie by Sue McKay and Patty Woolley, for church decoration by Kathy Elliott and Mark McCulloch, by Betsy Ellis, and by an anonymous donor. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, John. I now invite you all to just take a moment, pause as we get ready to enter into our time of worship together. Take a deep breath and slowly release it. Relax into whatever space you are in, whether it's in the sanctuary or your living room or bedroom or wherever you are joining us from this morning. If you are outside, just sense the warmth of the sun, the promise of an unfolding day, and the joy that spring brings to our hearts at this time of year. As we begin our time of worship together, let us remember that everyone is welcome here, just as you are. We'll now hear our wonderful duo once more again, bringing our morning introit. Thank you again, Jacob and Annalise, for your wonderful gift of bright music. And you kind of caught me off guard there as you switched from the one piece to another. I'm now going to invite John Armand to come forward to offer our chalice lighting, and Judy Boothby, who is going to light our chalice this morning.
Responsive reading by Dillman Sorrells for Holy Days. The congregational response is, "We light the flame." For holy days on which we recall the old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For Ramadan, which reminds us to be diligent in living our faith, even when it is inconvenient, we light the flame. For gathering today in this sacred space, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be together as a community, to remember the past, to plan for our future, and to be alive in our present, we light the flame.
Thank you, John. I now want to invite everyone to rise in body or in spirit to join in singing our opening hymn, number 61, "Lo, the Earth Awakens Again." Did. We'll now have our our story for all ages. I need help moving a chair and that little table out into the center of the floor there. Thank you, Francis. I'm going to scoot it just a little bit back. So, there we go. A little wider angle because we've got some folks all the way over on the side here. It's great to have a choir in here again. Yes, here for that, yeah. So, this might work better without the glasses on, steaming up. Our story today is titled Grandmother's Lesson. Once upon a time, there lived a brother and a sister named Leah and Sam, who were about, your age. They were Jewish, and Passover was their favorite holiday because there was so much to do. The day before the special Seder meal, they would help sweep the house clean of all breadcrumbs. They helped set the table with Passover dishes and put an extra chair and a cup on the table for the prophet Elijah. Then, on the evening of Passover, relatives would arrive and the Seder would begin just after sunset. One year, they came to the place near the end of the Seder where the father poured the wine into the cup for Elijah and asked the children to go to the door and look for him. This was one of their favorite parts because it was so mysterious. They ran to the door, they looked up and down the street. They didn't see anyone except the new kids next door who had just moved there from Haiti. They were playing in the yard, but there was no Elijah to be seen. Leah came back to the table feeling sad. "Where is Elijah?" she asked. "Every year we pour wine for him and open the door, but he never comes. What does he really look like? Will he ever come at Passover?" Her parents were silent, and they looked at the grandmother. "I have seen him," she said, "though I didn't realize it at first. Elijah comes in many disguises. I saw him long ago when he was about your age. On a cold day just before Passover, I was minding my brothers and sisters, and my mother was resting. There came a knock on the door. I opened the door, and there stood a beggar. He was dressed in rags, an old sackcloth over his back, and his shoes were full of holes. 'May I come in and sit by your fire and have some food?' he asked. 'I am so hungry and cold.' I knew that we were not a wealthy family," the grandmother said, "but my parents worked hard, and still we barely had enough food for our simple meals, let alone the Passover feast. 'We have nothing extra for you,' she said, and she shut the door. I peeked out the window," grandmother said, and saw the beggar walk to the neighbors next door. The neighbors were even poorer than we were, since their father had died. The mother worked really hard, taking in sewing. She had so many mouths to feed. I was sure that she would turn the beggar away, but I saw that she opened her door and invited him in. The next day, my mother was cooking our Passover meal and was setting the table. Suddenly, there came a cry from the kitchen. Our dog had grabbed the chicken from the counter and was knocking over the raisin pudding that my mother was preparing. When my father got home, he found us sitting and crying. There was no money to buy another chicken or make another dessert to celebrate Passover. We were still crying when we heard a knock on the door. It was our neighbor. She smiled and she said, "It seems that misfortune has come to you. I would like to invite you to celebrate Passover at our home this evening. I don't have much, just somehow I was able to stretch out the matzo ball dough a little bit more. But my soup kettle is full." So my parents thanked her and promised to bring the foods that they had prepared that had not been spoiled. After our neighbor was gone, my mother asked me who it was that knocked on the door while I was yet resting yesterday. The grandmother said, "It was a beggar. I told him that we didn't have enough, and I sent him away." "Oh, where did she go?" "He go?" she asked. "To the neighbors," I shrugged. My parents looked at each other. "Do you know who that beggar was?" My father asked. "No," I said. "It was the prophet Elijah," my mother said. "He came to see if we were helping to make the world a better place by being welcoming and generous." We had a wonderful Passover with our neighbors that year. We found that when we shared from our kitchen, there was plenty for all. When it came to the part in the Seder where my father poured the wine into the cup, I asked if I could go to the door and open it for Elijah. My parents smiled, the grandmother said, and then she finished her story by saying, "I didn't see Elijah again, but ever since then, I tried to treat everyone as if they were Elijah. And I find there is always enough." When the grandmother had finished her story, everyone was quiet, just like it is right now. Then Sam asked, "What do you mean that you treat everyone like Elijah, grandmother?" Grandmother looked at them and asked the question back. "What was the last kind and welcoming thing that you did for someone?" "I helped my teacher carry some books because she was tired," Sam answered. "I invited the new girl at school to play with me and my friends at recess," Leah said. "How did it feel?" Grandmother asked. "Good, warm, and happy," the children replied. "That is how it feels to treat everyone like Elijah," grandmother said. Leah jumped up from the table. "I think Elijah would like us to to invite our neighbors to celebrate Passover with us. Can we invite them to our Seder?" Mother and father looked at each other and smiled. The new neighbors weren't Jewish. They had recently moved to the neighborhood from Haiti. This is exactly the spirit of welcoming that Elijah taught. "Yes, go and tell them that if they would like to join our Seder meal, they would be welcome in our open door." It seemed that Elijah did visit Passover that day, after all. Thus ends our story. I'm going to ask, is Francis nearby to put our chair in such a way? I'm going to get set up for our joys and sorrows. Yeah. To sing our young people out. Just like our story for all ages and the telling of the story by the grandmother about an experience that touched deep into the soul of her life, we too open this space at this time of our service for people to share joys and sorrows from the experiences and the wisdom that they have experienced in their lives. Sometimes joyous, sometimes much less so. So today, if you have a joy or sorrow that you wish to share with this beloved community, I invite you, if you're in the sanctuary, to come forward and line up here behind me. If you are online, you can type your joy or sorrow into the chat, and John and I will kind of alternate having people speak their joys and sorrows. So please come forward. Finally, I light one last candle for all the joys and sorrows that remain within the deep recesses of our hearts and those that are ever present just below the surface. May they find hope, love, connection, and may they find a nonviolent release. Dear friends, please join me in the spirit of meditation and prayer. Great universal spirit, interconnected web of which we are a part, as we gather in this sacred time in our service, we hope to feel your presence with us and among us as we hear these joys and sorrows expressed. Today, we mourn the loss of loved ones and share in the deep sadness and sorrows of loved ones who have received bad medical news, who are looking at their own life end. Spirit, we also hold those loved ones and dear ones who have passed, and those who are struggling right now with their own health and trying to recover from life's ailments. Spirit, just as we move into the spring and feel the happiness and joy, we recognize the birthdays, the anniversaries, the growing of children who are growing bigger than their parents, and also the spirit of adventure that is alive, of getting to go on lifelong weighted trips to strange new lands and experience new experiences. Spirit, we gather in this time, in this place, because we know that each of our lives holds an important story. Each of our lives holds a deep and abiding truth. By coming together in this way, in this time, in this space, we grow closer to each other, and we grow closer to becoming one. Blessed be. Amen. I'm now going to invite John Armand to come forward and offer our reading this morning. This reading is kind of a special Easter gift from a colleague of mine, Dr. Robert Bach, who is a palliative care doctor and also sometimes doubles as a chaplain over at Northern Light, who offers this reflection. John?
Good Friday by Dr. Robert Bach. There was the cross lying on the steps to the altar. Lines of people coming to venerate it, honoring the carpenter from Galilee, the one who challenged the status quo. The sadness conveyed by the choir singing "Behold the Wood" in a minor key. The dissonant sounds unleashing images of others sacrificing their lives for what is right. Bonhoeffer standing in his last moments. Gandhi fallen in his own garden. Martin Luther King on a hotel balcony. Malcolm X in the midst of a speech. Khashoggi murdered for seeking the truth. Navalny returns home, twice poisoned. The sounds of dissonance continue unresolved. God knows the chord. We have to play it.
Thank you, John. I now invite our choir and guest musicians to bring our special music. You are in for a treat.
Became the cornerstone of the whole new world. The stone that the builders rejected became the cornerstone of the whole new world. The stone that the builders rejected. The stone that the builders rejected. The stone that the builders rejected became the cornerstone of the whole new world. Grain of wheat may be knocked to the ground and suffer through the winter's cold, only to rise right up again and bear its seed 1,000-fold. Oh, the stone that the builders rejected became the cornerstone of a whole new world. The stone that the builders rejected became the cornerstone of a whole new world.
Thank you, choir. Man, I have missed you. Yeah, it's so great. It's so great to have that live, energetic music. I can see how you play off each other and that wonderful high wail. Oh, I'm just soaking that in right now. Just soaking that in. Thanks, Annalise, for that. So today is the holiest day in the Christian calendar. It marks the commemoration of the rebirth of Jesus and his transformation from being human into a divine part of the Holy Trinity at the center of the traditional Christian faith. In the weeks leading up to Easter, I have had several conversations with people about their perspectives on Easter. Many Unitarian Universalists, including some of my colleagues, find Easter a very awkward holiday. Like our ancestors who came out of the liberal side of Christianity, many of us question the theology of Jesus' resurrection. We are uncomfortable with Jesus' sacrifice for humankind's sins and wrongdoing. We're not even so sure that we accept some of those concepts of sins or wrongdoing. The concept of resurrection is very hard to relate to. The notion that a person can be brought back to life and absolve others from the harm that they have caused seems misplaced, inauthentic, and even wrong. How can someone like a Russian president who has committed so many heinous war crimes be absolved of wrongdoing? Many people come to Unitarian Universalism seeking refuge in our spirituality that embraces every person's inherent worth and dignity and freedom of thought. We welcome the teachings of the prophet Jesus, who taught us to love one another and to be kind to one another and show preference from the weak, the poor, and the oppressed. We struggle with, or even go so far to say as we reject, the religion about Jesus that human beings have created and manipulated to control people. I struggle with many parts of Christianity that are used to coerce people into abandoning their own inner wisdom and conscience. I reflect on the concepts of Christianity that create exclusiveness and othering. Sometimes we reject the whole concept of Christianity because of wounding that we have experienced or the people that we have known who have suffered great harm in the hands of people claiming to be Christian but not really living up to the ideals as Jesus taught. This is a natural reaction, and sometimes in doing this, I think that we actually throw baby Jesus out with the bathwater. Christianity, like any other faith group, requires us to sort through and separate the wisdom from that which is not so wise. Think of it. When we look around the sanctuary of this church, we see Christian images all around us that our ancestors placed here because they believed in the moral teachings of Jesus. I too believe a lot of that there's a lot of wisdom that comes from our Judeo-Christian roots that can help us today as seekers and believers and people of faith. Therefore, I have to confess, I actually like Easter. It is a holiday that continues to make me think about my own theology and understand my Unitarian Universalist faith in a deeper way. Easter, the story of renewal that lives on because the story has so much to teach us about our human nature and why it is sometimes so hard for us to grow as a species, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. So if it's been a little while since you've picked up the Bible, I'm going to give you a brief recounting of the Easter story through my contemporary Universalist and Unitarian lens. Over 2,000 years ago, a teacher named Jesus traveled around the countryside, healing the sick, feeding the poor, and trying to teach people how to live better lives. In his travels around the countryside, Jesus gained many followers. His reputation as a wise and compassionate healer and teacher echoed throughout the land. In some ways, he became a bit of a celebrity. He taught people that they could live better lives by caring for each other, loving each other, and giving special attention to the people who are poor, injured, oppressed, and struggling. On the week before Easter, Jesus made a journey into Jerusalem, a major metropolis at the time. It was the first time that he entered a big city. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, and people were so excited to see him that they laid palm fronds down on the road so that he would not get muddy. It was kind of like the ancient world's red carpet treatment. People had heard of all the stories of Jesus healing and were excited to see him and welcome him into Jerusalem as a celebrity. But during the week that led up to Easter, Jesus taught in Jerusalem, and he taught a lot of things that people were not particularly comfortable with. He challenged the status quo. Even one of his followers, Judas, decided that monetary gain was more important than supporting his friend's message. The people and the leaders of Jerusalem at the time became very fearful because Jesus was saying things that challenged their authority or their privilege and comfort. And so Jesus was arrested and delivered to the emperor. They demanded that Jesus be tried as a criminal for disturbing the peace. The emperor feared that any decision he made unilaterally would poorly reflect on his leadership. So the emperor decided to delegate the trial of Jesus to a mob, and they sealed his fate. The mob called for Jesus' death, and so he was sentenced to be tortured and put to death by hanging on the cross. While all of this was going on, Jesus' followers became afraid for their own lives, fearful that the mob that condemned Jesus would soon start looking for them. They did not want to experience Jesus' fate, so they hid, fearing for their own lives. And so Jesus died a gruesome death on the cross so that his teachings would continue to live. The truth of what he taught was more important to him than his life. Perhaps there is no stronger statement or conviction that somebody can make. The day after he died, a couple of his loyal followers cut him down and hid his body in a cave to make sure that his body would not be disturbed. They rolled a stone over the front of the cave. They intended to return in a day or so when the coast was clear and then bury their teacher in a more dignified way. When they came back, the stone in front of the cave was still in place, but Jesus' body had disappeared. Shortly after that, Jesus appeared to his followers in a vision or a dream. And in that dream, Jesus told his followers that he had been resurrected and brought back to life by God. Jesus' actions and his unwillingness to abandon his commitment to those who were suffering was something he said that would live on, but only if his followers were willing to keep those teachings alive in their actions and their deeds. This is my interpretation of that story, a little bit different than maybe you're used to. But when I reread this story year after year, I find that there's always something different, some nuanced meaning that comes from reading this story. It really does reveal so much about who we are as human beings. Today, I want to focus on the concept of sacrifice because that's what a lot of people talk about and think about at Easter. Sacrifice is a spiritual practice that helps us see ourselves connected to the whole instead of separate from it. I believe that in this third year of a global pandemic, many of us have experienced moments of suffering. Can I get an amen? Yeah. We have given up some of the pleasures and necessities of life to serve the greater good. We've had to wear masks, socially distance, take vaccine shots, curtail many of our social gatherings and activities that give our lives so much meaning. The pandemic has led us to rethink how we engage in our congregational activities as a spiritual community. In the last 2 years, we have asked our staff and congregational leadership to give more of themselves than they did pre-pandemic. Living through the pandemic has been stressful and tiring, and yet, as the grandmother in our story pointed out, when we sacrifice or give something up for the greater good, it feels challenging, and if we can let go of that clinging, we find that the outcome actually might make us feel good in a way inside, knowing that we were thinking about others and not just ourselves. In other words, sacrifice with meaning is challenging, but it also brings many, many rewards. In our reading earlier, we heard the contrast between people who we venerate, or people who are venerating the cross, and people who gave up their lives so others could live free and better lives. The challenge of our times, and perhaps all times, is separating the prophetic teaching from prophets, from the not so prophetic teaching from false prophets. I know that each of us could probably rattle off a couple names from popular culture who we might see as people who try to show themselves as being prophets, but are actually not really working for the common good. Instead, they are trying to create separation, and they are trying to enrich themselves. But when I look at Jesus, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I see true prophets, people who are teaching teachings that are universal and inclusive. They don't pit one group against another. Instead, they invite people into healthy relationships of authenticity. They follow a deep process of compassion, kindness that supports the common good, and in that common good, they are also supporting themselves. It is in this sense of sacrifice that I believe is a powerful teacher for all of us. Their example reminds us that we have the power to bring change and to build a connection with our own acts and deeds. Their conviction is both inspirational to us, but sometimes I have to say it's a little intimidating. I don't know about you, but I am all about working for inclusiveness and compassion and kindness and supporting oppressed people in this world, but I am not sure that I am ready to sacrifice my life for that cause and become a martyr to those ends. I am willing to lead a life of service to those ends. It is that living into our values that gives my life purpose and meaning. It is the awareness of sacrifice, of giving up some of my comfortableness and privilege to accept the many inconveniences that come from serving as a minister and being a person of faith and just a human being and living in these times that are so hard. Sacrificing does not mean there does not have to be some big, huge thing. We don't have to be martyrs to be people of faith. Many of us give up things in our daily lives to make the world a better place for others. Perhaps it just means being a good parent, Perhaps it means serving on a committee or helping out with a bean supper or being a mentor or a confidant or a friend. Whether it's giving of your time, treasure, or talent, anything that builds connection usually requires us to give up something, even if we expect nothing in return. Sometimes just saying hi to someone who is suffering or lonely is a small thing, but is a way of giving up our attention, giving up our energy. It is with that spirit that I wish you all a happy Easter. May that which is growing within you find a place to be born and grow and thrive. And just as you continue your journey, may you also heed the many messages that come out of the Easter story that remind us that earth sings to earth, life sings to life, and healthy sacrifice serves the common good and helps us grow both as a world community and also helps our own individual growth. May this awareness offer us some perspective as we continue to ride the waves of the pandemic uncertainty. Let us hold to the simple faith that healthy sacrifice is the balm for our frustrations and sadness in the strange and interesting times, and that even as we feel challenged, that dissonance and the work of sacrifice still matters. Blessed be. Amen. I now invite our choir to lead us in our closing hymn, which Aaron is going to accompany us, I believe, on the organ. As we extinguish our Unitarian Universalist chalice flame, symbol of faith, hope, love, connection, and our call to the world that lies outside these walls, let us be reminded that although our worship has come to an end, our service to each other and the world has just begun. Thank you, Judy. I now invite you all to remain standing and stand at home if you wish for our benediction. The choir, yeah, might want to move around a little bit so you can see. Let us go forth into
the week ahead, striving to be faithful to our life's journeys, serving the needs of the earth and its inhabitants, sharing in the spirit of love with all we say and do, sharing in the spirit of love with all we say and do, sharing in the spirit of love with all we say and do. Blessed be, blessed be, blessed, blessed be.
Thank you. Go in peace. Happy Easter. And another round of applause for our special musicians and choir. It's good to have you back.